My name is Jean Gallagher, financial advisor and founder of my financial advising business, Seaside Solutions, and founder of Discover Rising Tides. Welcome to Show 31, Discover Rising Tides, How the Outside Makes the Inside Better, where we explore the importance of the outdoors and maintaining life balance. Through this series, we will be talking to women business owners to understand their journey. And we'll also be hearing from Lynn Schuster-Williams, as always. She's author and a coach in her segment, Rising Up. But first, today I'm excited to introduce Deb Matlock. Hi, Deb.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited for this. And so just a quick background. There's nothing quick about your background because there's so much to it. So I'm just going to give a short version and then we'll fill in all the blanks as we go. Deb grew up in Colorado and is deeply committed to nurturing the connection between people, animals, earth, and spirit. She spent 25 years working on a professional environmental and humane educator and naturalist. She's also a nature-based spiritual life coach and companion. Deb offers nature-based spiritual guidance work, animal communication, nature connection practitioner training, and workshops through her business, Wild Rhythms. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
We had a great time. I know when we were just learning about each other the other day. So I'm excited for this. So give us an idea about your business, but also what I want to dive into today is to talk about your business, but also the journey of where you started and how it's changed for you to bring you to where you are today. So let's start with that. Where did you start in this journey, and take us with you?
Awesome. Wow, what a great question. You know, I started my business in 2003, which I really can't believe is almost 2 decades ago at this point. And I had this idea that I was working as an environmental educator and a naturalist, and I was working with state parks and city municipalities and nonprofits. And I love that work. I still do. And I also kept finding myself up against this edge of, but I want to do some creative work that might not necessarily align with the missions of each of the organizations I was working with. And in a lot of cases for me, that meant wanting to explore people's spiritual connection to place, how people find a sense of sacred in the natural world, you know, integration of the more than human voice into life. Some of those things don't work so well when you're working for a government municipality or something like that, you know. So I created Wild Rhythms as a container. And my entire original business plan was I just need a container where I can put creative work and I can have a place to offer it, where the structure's there. You know, I have the insurance, I have the framework, I've got, you know, bookkeeping set up, I've got structure there and out of the way, so that I can just say, ooh, I have this idea and now I want to run this workshop that we're going to do this and this and this and that. And, you know, I can just put it there. And so that's where it started. I was back long enough ago that here in Colorado, I actually had to go into an actual physical office to register the name of the business. And I had a few names floating around, and Wild Rhythms just kept feeling like the right name. And I couldn't have even explained to you at the time why. It makes a lot more sense now, but I just went with it because it felt right. And I walked into the office, filled out the form. There was no internet form back then. And I walked out and I thought, I have no idea what I just did, but I have this business now.
So here we go. Interesting. So it really resonates for where you are today. Some foresight that you didn't know you had.
Thank goodness, because, you know, it's like, I love it still. And it's been so many things in these 19 years. It started out as, like I said, the container, which led right into being an arts-based environmental education consulting training program thing. And then with my life, as it's changed and morphed, and as I've grown and explored my own connection to wild nature, it's kind of grown with me. And in some cases, it's actually, I think, pulled me along. Yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm one step behind going, hey, wait, hold on a second. Can I have a say in this?
So it's really, Wild Rhythms has made you grow too.
Oh, I think, yeah. And I have to say now, as I reflect on it, I think it was one of the most profound experiences personally that I've had in terms of personal growth and professional growth. But, you know, it's made me meet all of my edges. It's made me confront all of my vulnerabilities and fears. I still have all that. I'm meeting edges all the time, programs, and every new idea, every new client, you know, there's new potentials there. You know, and without anybody telling me what I needed to do on my work plan on any given day, in regards to wild rhythms, sometimes that's
Mm-hmm.
good, sometimes it's not good. Sometimes that's a real challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, can someone just tell me what I should do, please?
I think that we all feel that way quite often, and that's the challenge of being an entrepreneur, right? That there isn't somebody to tell you what to do, and you have to listen to your own intuition, but also go against your, overcome your fears and overcome those edges that you're not totally comfortable with.
Yeah. And I would never have guessed if you'd asked me in 2003, does starting a business and running that take courage and the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to epically, quote unquote, fail. I
Mm-hmm.
don't really believe in failure because everything that hasn't worked has been really good learning. But there have been some things that I put a lot of energy into and they just didn't go.
Mm-hmm.
And have to not take that in and make it personal, as
Oh, totally.
instead just to say, okay, let me learn about what I offered, how I described it, what my audience is wanting. Let me take a breath.
Mhm.
Let me go
And
outside and walk the dogs.
yeah. Do you think that the things that didn't go as planned really helped you build what does work?
Oh my gosh, 100%, a
Mhm.
hundred percent. It helped me figure out what to build upon, what to let go
Mhm.
of. A big thing that it did was it helped me realize that a business is a co-creative process, I think,
Mm.
with, well, in my case, it's myself, the wild natural world, and also the people, my clients. And I think when I started out, I didn't understand that it was okay to kind of create with your clients. And I
Mm.
thought I was supposed to have all the answers and just know what to offer and put these amazing workshops and programs out there. And what I've learned over the years is I actually really, really want and need my client feedback. I want to hear from them. I love that. I think every program I run, I always have a little survey and like, please, 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 I just need a few minutes. I read
Mhm.
every word, because it's like I can only go so far with what's in my mind and my own intuition, what I feel like is coming through me, which I think part of business can be very spiritual that way. But
Mhm.
also, I want to meet people where they are and what they're wanting. And I
Mhm.
put out some ideas over the years that I look back now, I'm like, well, no wonder nobody signed up. I don't even know what I was talking about. Like, why was I thinking anybody else was going to know what I was talking about?
There's that vulnerable piece, right?
Yeah,
Allowing it to happen, but then shift accordingly.
exactly.
So you
Shift
worked for
accordingly.
the city and the state park system, and how long did you do that, or when did you make a transition to be completely on your own?
Yeah, I would say it's been a little bit of a back and forth. Um, Wild Rhythms was always there, varying levels of engagement, whether it was a very part time or very full time. I would say it's been probably the last five or let's say maybe 7 years that
Mhm.
this has been kind of front and center
What
as
was
as
what was that transition like? I know that a lot of people are either working for a corporation, or whether it's a park system or a corporation, they're still working in a structure of business, and they're wanting to go off on their own, and or wanting to transition. And what was the transition like for you?
I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It was rough, you
I
know.
know I did it too.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not
like
pretty.
it was very messy, and I got as prepared as I could, but I knew I felt like my life was becoming a bottleneck. And because I had other obligations and also Wild Rhythms was my thing. It was
Mhm.
always getting the back seat because I had other organizations or people that were paying and expecting from me. And so there was a lot of work that needed a lot of attention. And so when I made that shift, the first thing I did was spend several months really digging in and creating and building and refining my systems, on the inside of my business and all these things that just needed my time. But, it didn't generate a ton of income right then,
Mhm.
you know, and I still ask myself the question, I'm very open to the idea that, um, I don't ever want this business to be something that I have to force.
Mhm.
Like I want to do work that I love and I'm really inspired about. And, I'm very open to the possibility I may decide to bring in some additional work at some point, so that I can maybe do just a certain amount of this or
Mhm.
that, you know. And so that was the other thing I'm always trying to guard against is I don't want to lose my inspiration for Wild Rhythms because I put too much pressure on it.
Mhm.
So it's always a dance, I'm finding.
And that's really a great outlook too, because as we get in the groove of a business or in the trenches of the business, which is even harder to be in, it's easy to lose sight of why you're there. And it becomes a drudgery of doing it every day. And then you're, like you said, you're losing that inspiration. So it is important to remind yourself of why Wild Rhythms is important, not to you, but to others.
Yeah, and I like how you're saying that. Why are our businesses important to others as well? Why? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think business really, honestly, in one of its highest forms can be this gift. It can be a service. It can be, all the beautiful things we often assign to nonprofits. I think business, the world runs on businesses, and I think conscious businesses that are very deliberate can make massive change.
Mm.
And I know as a solopreneur, that requires me to be inspired and not burned out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Exactly.
just
Easier said than done
easier
sometimes.
said than done. That's right.
So tell us, what is Wild Rhythms today?
Today, Wild Rhythms is a business that focuses on working with largely practitioners who are interested in weaving their own wild connections to nature, to their sense of sacred nature into the work that they're offering. And so I work with people one-on-one, also some training programs. And so I'm talking about, like I've got clients who are life coaches, forest bathing guides, therapists, educators. I had a hospice nurse as a client. People who want to
Mm.
weave their love of wild nature and their sense of their own spiritual selves in wild nature into unique offerings for their clients. And what I really love to do is help people like weave their passions and say, okay, what's this really cool, unique thing that isn't happening in the world yet? Because the world needs, I think, here's my big red flag, opinion coming out. The world needs as much creative nature connection work as we can put out there. And all the different flavors that people are going to bring to the table, that I have clients with ideas that I would never personally have thought of, but it's so cool. One client is a quilter, a seamstress person, and her vision is beautiful, and I think we need all that work to live on this
Mm.
earth right now. And so
What
that's
do
really,
you
yeah.
No, what do you think that, so the nature connection piece, what does that do for us? Let's talk about that for a little bit, and how does the spiritual piece weave into that?
Yeah, I think to talk about nature connection, the first thing we have to sort of talk about is what even is nature connection and does it
Mm.
exist? There are certain languages that don't even have a separate word for like the human nature, and so it's hard in English. I find when I write and talk and speak about it, it's like my words almost create more of, as much of a division as we're trying to not have, like
Mm-hmm.
humans and nature, or let's connect with nature. It's like we're separate and there it is. So I think the first thing that's an important conversation is what is nature connection? If we see ourselves as part of nature and every bite of food and every sip of water and every breath of air as something that intimately connects us every day with nature, it can be nature connection can explode in our minds. And so for everybody to say, what does it mean to me? For
Mm.
somebody, it might mean trail running up a wilderness trail. For somebody else, it might mean, being a gourmet chef in their kitchen, really
Mm-hmm.
being conscious about all the beautiful food that they're preparing. I think but I think the conscious awareness of nature connection, however we define it, it helps center us. It helps us locate ourselves as beings on this earth, as part of this vast and amazing web of life. Not people that shouldn't be here, not people that are in charge of everything and at the top of the pyramid, but people that are in it with all the other beings. And so to me, at its core, when we look at it that way, I think it can expand our worldview of ourselves, our role
Mm-hmm.
that we play, our sense of, I mean, ecological identity is a term that it kind of describes that, and it can, I think, bring with it inspiring options for us, sense of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think it can really inform our way of being.
So when you're working with practitioners or in the conversations with whatever level of the people that you're working at, um, do you ever find that people don't understand what their connection is, or how do people that have maybe don't have an exposure to the outdoors or don't have an exposure to nature, how do they learn how important that is?
Oh gosh, yes. I would say that I encounter that a lot. And I have,
Which surprises me, right? So in my own little bubble, how do you not know that? But I know that, and I'm always amazed, or maybe I'm just really naive in realizing that there's people that don't have never been to a body of water or spend zero time outside.
yeah, I think it's interesting because in the way that I would define nature connection,
Mm-hmm.
it's everywhere all the time, indoors and outdoors. There's wilder nature outside. There's a lot of variations of that. But I mean, you can be standing in an elevator in a high rise in a big city, and there's going to be wood paneling or carpeting on the ground, or plastic buttons that are ancient life forms. I mean, like if we put the perspective there,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's everywhere. But I think when we say nature connections, generally speaking, people think, oh, well, I don't live anywhere near a national forest, or I don't live by the ocean, or all of that. And so I think if we start to say, okay, but wait a minute, even if you go from an air conditioned car into a parking garage, into an office building, there's still air flowing. You're still going to feel a temperature change when you're in that garage versus when you get inside the building. There's still going to be all of these ways that we can become aware of our connection to nature. We're still going to know, like here in Colorado, people are still going to watch the weather. And if it's a snowstorm, they're probably going to leave earlier, even if they're gonna curse the snowstorm and be in a grouchy mood all day. That's some nature connection there, like, oh, I gotta leave half an hour earlier because the roads are gonna be bad. So I think it's like it starts with saying to somebody, what does nature mean to you? And then this is the important part too, is like, what is your heart asking for you around this? A lot of people I've met who don't think about themselves as having a nature connection also have like a yearning for it.
Mm. So
It's
do
like
you have to help them identify what that yearning is? So it's there, but maybe do they not have a connection, a definition of their yearning, or do they have a little idea that that's really what it is?
I've seen both. I've seen some people say I have no connection to nature and I just wish I did.
Mm-hmm.
And here's this person who walks their dog every morning and lives, like, well, let's talk about all the connections that you do have.
Mm-hmm.
But then I've also seen people who are out all the time and it's not part of their yearning. For them, it's like, I'm going out to go running. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't even consider the part that it's like I'm running through a beautiful trail system or a beautiful park. So I mean, this is a journey that I think everybody has to kind of take for themselves, of like, what is it that nature means to them? What is it that their sense of being connected to it means? Because I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a lot of benefits for ourselves and for the world around us. But of course, if somebody doesn't care, you can't really, I would look at it and say, everybody's got an ecological self. We're all nature beings. It doesn't matter if you are conscious about it or not, because we all have to have air, water, like it's just is. It's a biological fact. But there's a difference between that and the emotional cognitive awareness, and then the
And
desire to
bringing
nurture it.
awareness to them, for them to bring awareness to what they're taking in, and they might just not realize.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say in my career, more people that I've encountered don't realize it
Mm-hmm.
than the people who I've encountered who don't care.
Yeah, I
A
would hope
very
so too.
small number of people I've encountered are like, I don't really care. I mean, tiny numbers compared to the people who are like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about eating oatmeal as part of my nature connection. you know
And so, how does the spirituality piece come into play too?
I think for a lot of people, and myself included, when we see ourselves as part of this web of life, this amazing, vast, diverse web of life, that quite frankly is full of more mysteries than we know a little bit. We don't know a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Einstein who said something to the effect of, we only know 1/2 of 1% of what nature has chosen to reveal to us. I may have just butchered that a little bit, but something like that. So I think when we focus on our own nature connection and we value, it's a value in our life, and we create space for the awareness and appreciation and activity of it. It like helps us to see ourselves. It helps us to dance with those eternal spiritual mysteries like life and death and meaning. I mean, it's really hard. Here in Colorado, you go on a trail for a hike, you're going to hit life and death. There will be a body of a chipmunk or a mouse or a part of a rabbit that somebody else predated. There's going to be evidence of all of these universal things that, regardless of our spiritual beliefs, regardless of our cultures, there's universals here about this mystery of being on this planet. And I think that nature, when we're conscious about our role in it and our connection to it, it allows us to see that in a way that it keeps us from pretending that it's not the truth, that we are living in this,
Mm.
we're living in a mystery. And
Mhm.
our species has tried to answer that mystery for years. We're never going to fully answer it. We can only guess.
Mhm. Mm. Well, that's yeah, that's interesting. An interesting way to look at that as well, and the evolution of everything that we see around us, also. Yeah. And so when you're either dealing one on one or in a group setting, what is the is it well is there a typical topic to start with? Are there stages of education or stages of exposure that you're giving to people, or how does that work?
I would definitely say there's not a typical place. It kind of depends on the person or the audience. So, like, if I was doing a program for like a general public audience,
Mm-hmm.
like when I've done wellness programs for businesses, where it wasn't like the 15 people there personally signed up and said, "Ooh, I want to go do this sense of place nature workshop." They got this opportunity basically forced on them from,
Mm-hmm.
that's a different audience than when I've got people who've self-selected into a really intensive retreat
Mm-hmm.
about deepening your sacred connection to nature. And those people, so it kind of depends on that. But the other piece is at the core of it, the part that is, I would say, the same,
Mm-hmm.
that I am not the one teaching anything. I feel like my role is 100% facilitation. I just create the space and the container. And then I need to get out of the way, because it's the person in the wild earth. It's the person and the bird in the tree. It's the flower growing. It's the stream. It's whatever is happening. That's the relationship. That's where the transformation, that's where any quote unquote teaching,
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of feel like I'm just there as the human bobblehead for the earth. I'm the one who said, here's the sign up form and here's the directions to the where we're going to park. Um, and then to create some structure, to provide some opportunities for exploration. One thing I've seen a lot, especially with more generalized programming, is people are like, I want to be out here and do this. I have no idea where to start.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to just walk up the trail. So what do I do? So giving little ideas for things,
Mm-hmm.
but then knowing that at the end of the day, my job is to get out of the way,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know what's happening in their heart and soul and with the earth, what's going on between them. That's,
What kind of transformations or what kind of changes and do you see while people are working through the programs?
I again, so many, depending on where somebody is coming in and what their goals are. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen people, like, let's say it's a practitioner who's coming in, wants to develop more of their own practice and then weave it into their work with clients. It's really fun to see how they're experiencing things, and how they're also simultaneously finding inspiration, like, oh, I've got these clients and we do this monthly gathering and I'm gonna do this thing. I've also seen, well, here's a good story. I was leading a hike. This was very much a very general mainstream public program. It was on the natural history of black bears, just their
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle. And I turn around at one point and this woman is tears running down her face. And I thought, oh my gosh, did she get stung by a bee? What happened? I'm like, oh, we have an emergency here. And so of course, I checked in with her and she said, I just didn't know I had so much in common with another species. And I could feel from her, like, this was a big worldview shift moment. And she did stay after the hike and we talked a little bit more. And I mean, honestly, I think for her, that was a big personal identity shift.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the moments that, to me, I feel like, I don't know where she is in the world today. This was 20 years ago, or what she's done with it. But if there's any way to be a part of it, of her, somebody's appreciation, seeing themselves in another animal, another species,
Mm-hmm.
finding our commonality. I mean, to me, that's like the stuff that could change the world. If we see
Wow.
ourselves in other life, we are going to have to behave as if the other life matters as much as we do.
And if
And
she wasn't exposed to that, she would never know.
she would never know. Exactly,
Wow.
which is why I think accessibility, creating really good, solid programs with a lot of integrity,
Mhm.
being very aware, as like when I work with practitioners, one thing that we have to, we talk a lot about is how to create diverse and programs that are accessible.
Mhm.
We've got to make sure that this work is reaching people in all different ways and avenues and walks of life.
The diversification is really, really important
Yeah.
because it's unfortunate that the outdoors isn't as diverse as you would expect it to be, or it's not a reflection of the diversity in the outdoors. So the
That's
people that
exactly
are
it.
going outdoors, it's definitely not a reflection. And so
You
what do
know,
we need to do?
yeah.
How does that change?
Well, I think there's a lot of ways for this to change, and I think we're talking about a deep cultural and in some cases institutionalized challenge. That we've got to work at from a lot of angles. It's like sociologically or ecologically, they call them wicked problems, and there's so many influences that create a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I know that I've seen and that I personally think is an important part of this conversation is going back to the definition of nature connection,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing that everybody's going to have their own experience. They're going to bring their own personal stories, family stories, ancestral stories. And so for one person, for example, I actually saw this happen at a conference. There was a service learning field trip to go out and to work on a local farm. And for some people, that was really fun and novel, and let's go do this. For another person who was raised in the Deep South, and her ancestors, her as recent as her grandparents, were forced into slave situation, servitude on
Mm.
farms. She was like, that doesn't feel good to me at all.
Wow.
And as a facilitator, we have to be careful and understand that this is where that personal definition and understanding of what nature means to each of us, what it means to connect, and what would actually be nourishing and helpful for us as individuals.
Mm.
Because for her, there were other ways she was going to have a better experience.
Mm-hmm.
And what was really, I was grateful to her for sharing that with all of us, because I was not aware of what she was going through. I was in the same little group that she was in, heading off to the farm for the field trip. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know what she was dealing with. I was worried about, do I have enough water in my backpack? Right. My experience was different.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that's one of the ways is being sensitive to the fact that it does, nature connection, sacred nature connection, does not mean one thing, and nobody can define it for anybody else.
Mm. And giving people the space to express how they're receiving or what they need.
Yeah, and what would actually be inspiring and exciting to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this particular person was really she was an entomologist, and she lit up when we like started talking. So she just decided she would go to the farm and look at the butterflies and insects, and make it something for herself. But she still had to do that work for herself.
Mm.
That was something. It was a nature connection professional conference, so she had that skill set. The practitioner in me said, yeah, but what if she didn't have that skill set? What's my response? How do I create that opportunity for somebody?
And that can be a challenge too.
Yes.
And but I think that excuse me, if more people are creating a more inclusive environment, that's going to help too.
Yeah. And that's where I think if more people say, okay, I have this passion, I have this idea, I have these experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to create something out of this that I can offer,
Mm-hmm.
then by nature of the very effort of that, it's going to become more diverse and inclusive. It's not just going to be one type of programming offered over and over again. And no matter where you are in the world, if you go to this program, it's going to look this way. That's not serving
Mm-hmm.
diversity. That's not serving inclusion the way that innovation would, I don't think.
Yeah. So if we're offering nature to as many people as we can, that puts more people into nature. So let's talk about a little bit about responsibility, because you mentioned it before, and I think it's an incredibly important topic, is to understand what is our responsibility to support nature. If nature is going to support us, how are we going to support her?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. And I know we kind of dove down this when we were meeting
We
before
did.
the podcast. I think this is a really important piece, that whether we're personally going out
Mhm.
or we're working with clients or we're attending a program is we need to say, what's the reciprocity here? And I
Mhm.
think the answer to that can be as varied as there are people, certainly as there are places. I think it's first and foremost, it's an awareness and a commitment to finding a way to reciprocate.
Mhm.
So for example, if somebody's always, they live in a neighborhood and they've got a trail and they walk their dog on that trail every day, you know, and it's just part of their life, maybe a reciprocation could be to set up a trail cleanup day or to go volunteer when one is set up by the organization who runs the trail or something like that. If it's a business and people are using private land or something, create a part of the annual business calendar to say, here's our volunteer days to go work and give back to the land. If it's let's say somebody like maybe this woman who had the experience on the black bear hike that I mentioned,
Mhm.
maybe a reciprocation there could be to find a conservation organization that supports bears and bear habitat and become a member,
Mhm.
educate herself more about that. I mean, I think the actions can be small, they can be large, they can
Mhm.
be informal, they can be formal. Like I've certainly led programs where I was out of my own area, like a guest in another state, and I wasn't going to be back there. In those cases, I would encourage people to dig within and say, what would be reciprocal that you could do here?
Mhm.
Especially a conference, for example, where everybody's from someplace else, versus the programs that I might do on a regular basis around where I live. My engagement reciprocity could be different. But I think we need to ask, and it doesn't have to even be direct. Like I know one woman who just decided to turn part of her yard into a pollinator garden. And that's her give back for all that she's gotten from the natural world, generally speaking, throughout her life. So it wasn't like she cleaned up trash in one trailhead. She just said, hey, I've got this little bit of land here that doesn't need to be grass.
Mhm.
I'm going to make it this thing. So I think it's just, it starts with the awareness and the understanding that we are living in this collaborative, beautiful synergy with life around us. And we have a lot of power in that place. We don't have to be walking around feeling disempowered and depressed all the time because the climate, these are hard issues we're dealing with and they're
Mhm.
real. And I'm not trying to make light of those by saying one little action is going to change it. But there's 7.5 billion people. If you start exponentially increasing those actions, then
If half of those people did one little thing.
it will change it. Exactly. We have a lot we can do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so how do you think, so this is one thing that I'm challenged with personally, and one of the things that makes me a little frustrated too. So the socials. Social media, right? And the pressure on social media, the pressure that social media puts on us, but also the pressure that social media puts on nature. So one example is the ridiculous, so there's an opinion. So I'll take the opinions out. So the TikTok, right? And so TikTok comes out here. Some people put some really great place on TikTok, and then all of a sudden, 900,000,000 people show up at this one place that can't support that. That's happened in our area a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And so there's that one piece that the social media brings into play. But I think that the other piece too is that if we're looking at whether it's Facebook groups or Instagram, everything looks perfect. So we're either going into nature for the purpose of the gram. The reason that I'm here is to put something cool on my Instagram and I don't really care where I am. Or the other side of it is too that I'm seeing all of these people doing these amazing things. I don't think I can do any of them, so I'm not going to do anything.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So social media brings into play, and it does bring good things too, but just picking at some of the challenges that I've seen out there. What are your thoughts on social media, and what do you see or what do you hear from people that you're talking to?
Yeah. I mean, you're pinpointing a tension point that I also feel viscerally.
Mm-hmm.
As a small business owner, I've got social media presence. My
Mm-hmm.
business is about slowing down your rhythms and spending time in the natural world. So get off the computer kind of stuff, so like, where's that balance between connecting with my audience
Mm-hmm.
and not being like a spam for them? And I think what, going back to the reciprocal actions and how every little action adds up, I think social media, if we look at it as an ecosystem too,
Mm-hmm.
and we
Mm.
all check ourselves and our actions and we say, hey, what are we putting out there? and B, what's our intention, and C, what are we responding to?
Mm-hmm.
Like if we just don't respond to stuff that's icky, it's gonna take it away, from being the dominant thing. And we're gonna, social media is not gonna go away. And I do think there's some beautiful, amazing positives, and there's some
Mm-hmm.
very, very scary. It's like we haven't evolved as quickly as social media has, and we just don't know how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those are, but I think in terms of the natural world, I've also seen it play a really important role.
Mm-hmm.
This trail is super muddy, from the rains last night. Stay away, it's getting destroyed. And I've seen like local park rangers be able to put this stuff out there like that. And,
Mm.
so I think if we just have our intention for what is it that we're doing, and how often, and like I said, this is a live and well tension for me. I'm constantly adjusting that just as a business owner in this realm, because it's a new frontier.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I started
Yeah.
Wild Rhythms, there was no social media. I mean, I don't even, like it was a whole new part to integrate. What the heck do I do with this thing?
Right. Yeah.
So I think
Totally.
if we
But
if
it's,
we use it positively, and we just start saying
mhm,
this is how it's going to be.
mhm. It's an important thing to consider. Is what I like how you said that social media is in its own ecosystem. That's an interesting way to look at that. And then being conscious about how we're using it, because you're right, there are very positive ways to communicate different things that might be going on in nature.
Yeah, and there's ways to inspire people to see the beauty around them, and there's ways,
Mm.
like, because beauty is right outside our doors, no matter where we are.
Hmm.
Literally, a weed growing up in a sidewalk is beautiful if you take the time to look at it. And I've seen some of that in social media. I've actually, found a photo that I've used in some blogs that are literally grass, growing up in a sidewalk. And it's so I think if it allows us to start to see that, I think what we have to do is deal with the addictive qualities of it,
Hmm.
check
Oh,
ourselves. And I mean, it's real.
it is.
I feel it in myself at times, and it's like, oh my gosh, I've got a
Hmm.
little app on my computer that I can turn on that will block all the social media, so that I don't just find myself unconsciously over there while I'm trying to do something
Oh,
else.
oh, wow. What app is that?
It's called Freedom. I think it's freedom.us. It's great. And when you go to the site, when you're on a block, it'll put up a nice little green and white butterfly, and it says you are free. And you can set up, like I set up a social media and a news, and I called the little group of websites time sinks. So if I'm like, okay, I need to block my time sinks
Oh
for three
boy.
hours. And then you can set it for a certain amount of time. And then if you want to override that, you have to turn off your computer and start over. So you can't just go in and
Oh,
override it. You have to be,
I
and there's
think I
times
think I need to do some research here.
yeah, it's pretty awesome.
And
And I can feel it when I get close to the end. It's like 2 hours and I set it for 3. It's like, I just want to go check my messages, or like what's happening in the news, so I feel the truth of that. And I think we're all in a place as beings on this earth where we are dealing with that as a new beast for sure.
it very much so, very much so.
Yeah.
And how do you feel that, do you see a difference? Well, there was a difference during COVID, but now that we're hopefully on the other side of COVID, what transitions have you seen in people through this time?
As COVID started, I definitely, I think a lot of us saw a huge increase in interest in being outdoors.
Mhm.
People living around trailheads. I mean, you can't park anywhere near a trailhead in
I
Boulder for the
still
last two
can't. I'm
years
not
for,
happy.
yeah. And at the same time, with that came a very clear, obvious understanding that that loving something to death is real.
Mm.
People like, oh, I'm just going to go climb this mountain, but I haven't, I don't really know exactly how I'm supposed to do this to be really appropriate. So I think it's shown me as an educator that where some important gaps are. I think that the love of nature excitingly got ignited.
Mhm.
I've definitely seen more people out in the local parks here than I ever said before the pandemic. I also think it's an interesting thing that we're seeing as we're moving back into life. What are people going to do with that? I mean, there's there's some real challenges going on for example, in animal shelters right now. They're overflowing across the country because people got pandemic dogs and now their lives are going back. And to me, this is where we have to stop ourselves and say, okay, so what does deep, honest connection really mean? And how do we move forward, understanding our connection to the world around us in a way that is responsible and respectful? And I think it starts with education, and I think it starts with experience. People letting themselves learn some things, letting themselves understand, how do you be on this trail? How do you do these things? Or what does it mean to adopt a dog? Like really, 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 what does that mean? And how is that part of wild nature connection? Because I think it is 100%. In my mind anyway. It may not make sense to everybody listening, but to me, there's no difference. It's about us as humans connecting with the life around us and not centering ourselves as primary in all cases.
And that really speaks to the importance of your work in creating that deep, honest connection.
And I think that it's a lot of work. A lot of people are doing various forms of this work. I think it doesn't have to just be nature workshops like I do. It can be anybody's work. It doesn't matter what somebody's doing. The natural world is the backdrop. It is the front drop. It's the center drop. I mean, it's just it's an awareness piece, and it's just us saying, all right, we're part of it. We're all connected. The pandemic definitely showed us that. And, I think we've got a really impressive opportunity right now to say, okay, we've got the reality of what we've got here. What do we do moving forward individually and collectively? And I really do think those deep connections are, we've got to have the relationships and the love underneath our actions.
And so in order to work on that process, or in order to make a difference for how do people find you?
I've got a website, wild-rhythms.com. I've also got, how everybody laugh now, I've got a Facebook group called Sacred Connection, Earth, Animals, Spirit. And I'm always happy to chat. So people are welcome to reach out. I'm happy to connect with people. I just think these are important conversations, regardless really of whether or not people are working together. It's just, we need to inspire each other and move forward collectively. Yeah,
they are. And we'll make sure that your contact information is in the show notes as well.
Awesome.
So Deb, I want to thank you. I know that we could probably talk so much about, there's so many pieces that we didn't delve into because there could even be a part 2 here. There's so much to work with, but I want to thank you very much for your time today and sharing your wisdom. And I look forward to further conversations.
Oh, and I'm honored to have the invitation, and I really enjoyed it as well, and happy to chat anytime. So thank you for doing this really beautiful podcast work as well.
Thanks so much. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Jean.
Welcome.
Thanks.
And what a wonderful story that Deb was talking about, isn't it?
Beautiful. So there's just so many things. I'm going to talk more about what Deb talked about because it's so fantastic. So I came to you today for the Rising Up segment, Jean, ready to talk about questions. So my coaching clients, and I'm not the first person to say this by any means, always talk about how I say that the quality of our lives and our businesses are directly related to the quality of the questions we learn to ask ourselves and what we do with the answers that we get. And recently, a friend of mine from college sent me an article that was all about questions because she knew I loved it. And it was all about this idea of transformational questions and how they lead us on a quest, and this connection between the word quest and question. And maybe we think of a quest as a journey of soul questions and just so many things in that. And so nature obviously gives us lots of opportunities to find new questions to ask and to find new inspirations for new questions that can lead us to new transformational discoveries, things, aha moments like the woman on the black bear path that Deb talked about. And, I loved what she said about the language and where our language keeps us constricted unless we learn to question it, right? This idea of I'm going to have a relationship with nature means maybe I think it's outside of me. And so the language of our questions and how we can learn from nature to even question the way we form a question, right? And what we think about it. And so this idea that transformational questions can really change our direction in life. And so what if we look at these questions as those deeper questions? And what if we get intentional about those deeper questions? So Deb mentioned, what does nature or a nature connection mean to me? That's a great question to ask, especially before I have an encounter with nature, right? Whether it's walking outside, which, by the way, I have a plot of land in the middle of my urban yard that's all pollinators, and it's so wild, Deb. So I thought you were talking about me for a second. And then what can nature teach me today? It can be a really simple question that leads to a discovery you can't even imagine yet. What can nature teach me today? How can I learn to serve? You guys talked today about how we serve nature and how can nature support me, but then how can I support the natural world and the wholeness of our world is a great question to ask. I loved what Deb said about life's mystery. What can I see of life's mystery that will bring me more in touch with the important questions my soul needs me to ask? How about that? Right? Let's just see how juicy that can get. So my question for all of us this week is, what will your quest in nature be this week? What activity, what thing can you do that maybe Deb inspired you to do to get outside, to do something that connects you to nature? And what quest related questions will you come up with before you have that experience? What questions are important to you to answer this week? And I can't wait to hear what that turns into. Thank you for this, Jean, and thank you to Deb, too. This was wonderful.
I love that, Lynn. And I never put the connection between quest and question together.
Yes.
It's brilliant.
Juicy. Juicy, juicy.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Jean.
Yeah, and so I want to thank everyone for listening. Today's show was sponsored by Seaside Solutions, my financial services company. And as a business owner, it's easy to be pulled in many directions, and often taking care of yourself plummets to the bottom of the list, or even going outside that plummets. So for me, I find myself outside to reground. My time outdoors helps me manage my day more effectively and be more present for my clients. Through this, Discover Rising Tides was born. And at Seaside Solutions, we truly believe that education is the foundation of financial wellness, and our primary focus is to provide guidance that is designed to help achieve your long-term financial goals and visions. And working within a plan allows space for doing more things that you love, like being outside to make the inside better. If I can help you recreate or create and realign your plan, or if you'd like to be added to the weekly newsletter, please let me know. And in this week's topic, how money makes a difference in conversations is crucial right now. Your referral means the big, beautiful world to me. If I can help, please let me know. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Striving, so surviving. I keep on thriving, tides are rising, water flows, my confidence